Hello everyone and welcome to the FinTech Times. I'm Tyler and I'm here today at Pay360 and today we're joined by Abe. Abe, how are you?
Hi Tyler, I'm very well. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm enjoying the event. So many people here. It's a lot of great companies. Yes.
For sure.
So why don't we start, Abe, by telling our viewers who you are and where you've come from?
Sure. Well, my name is Abe Smith. I am Chief Growth Officer of a company called Paymentology. Paymentology is what I would call a neo-processor. So we are an issuer processor. We work across 47, 48 different countries around the world, and we provide issuer-side payment processing. So we sit between a card issuer and the scheme to evaluate the data flow in between and make a whole raft of decisions and effectively process the payments.
Okay. So you're at the very core of the payment transaction, really.
Without issuer-side payments processing, there would be no payments industry. All we do is we provide it at the cutting edge on a cloud-based environment with greater functionality, greater data smarts, and more extensibility.
That sounds very interesting. I think you've come to the right event with everything about PayTech today. We're looking today at everything the industry is doing to facilitate the modern transaction. And especially in light of the COVID pandemic of the last 2 years, what we've really seen is the pandemic push forward existing schemes and plans to push PayTech into the modern front. Now, my first question to you is, Abe, is I'm very interested to know what the new normal of payments looks like.
It's an interesting one. I mean, the pandemic has really served to push payments predominantly online. There's just less footfall, there's more online transactions. So then you ask yourself, if you forget about the context and you think about what does that mean, that is a multiplicity of implications, oftentimes security related and identity related. So if you're an issuer-side payments processor like us, that means being able to dovetail with KYC, biometric solutions, a kind of range of ways in which clients can authenticate themselves. But it also entails being present in the payments flow in a subliminal way, in being embedded in apps such that the payment happens in the background rather than something which is overt. And a combination of those is increasingly leading to payments not just not using a physical card, not even just not using a virtual card, but almost being invisible in the background as part of your daily activities, rather in the way in which you order an Uber and you're not really conscious of the fact that in doing so you've both identified yourself and you've completed a card transaction.
Yes. It's particularly poignant that you should mention that in light of the strong customer authentication regulations that have just come in to make payments more secure and more authentic to the user. Are there any payment models from the last 2 years, or maybe some that are coming up, that you're excited to see?
Oh, for sure. I mean, a whole raft. Where do I begin? I mean, so definitely the percentage of payments which run over traditional scheme rails is going to decrease. And you already start to see that we're looking at different models which don't involve scheme rails, which involve effectively DeFi settlement processes in the background. So those are things I'm excited about. Also, there's the kind of disruption of whole traditional industries. One of the things I love about payments is, and particularly issuer-side payments processing now, is it's a massive market. It's a $500 billion market, but B, it's in a state of flux, so that wherever you look, there's a huge new opportunity to disrupt an industry. Retail finance is a great example of that. Right now, retail finance is hundreds of millions of dollars worth of value on a daily basis. And it does not settle over any kind of rails. It settles over EPOS integrations with banks, which is a very inefficient way to get new customers. So we're looking at ways in which you can leverage either scheme rails or even DeFi rails to do things like interest-free credit instantaneously without integration into retailers, to disrupt effectively what is a growing marketplace for things like buy now, pay later, but to do so in a way that the customer gets a better deal and the retailer doesn't lose the relationship with that end customer. So I mean, if we had another 30 minutes, I'll give you 5 more examples, but there's just a couple that are super exciting for us right now.
Yes. Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head, really, with your answer. I think definitely buy now, pay later is coming into full popularity, and I think, especially in light of rising costs and soaring inflation, we see a lot of consumers moving to these alternative payment models to manage their expenses, which I'm really excited to see. When we think of paytech, and especially when we consider the growth of paytech within the last 2 years, often we might think of challenger banks or new startups that are disrupting the industry. But what we must also remember is that there were incumbent banks already in existence in the field. How do you think this shift to digital has impacted traditional banks, and how can they fight back against the challenges?
Well, Tyler, implicit in your question is the assumption that they've already shifted, and of course they haven't. We're looking at 25,000 traditional tier 1, 2 and 3, or even just tier 2 and 3 banks, all of whom are somewhere on the transition to being digital. I would say the majority are really in the infancy of that transition. And so, things for those guys to think about is, well, first off, the mindset is interesting. If in your transition to being a digital bank, you want to do basically the things you already did, but maybe more cheaply and more quickly, then you're missing the point and you're missing the opportunity. If, on the other hand, you think to yourself, what is my purpose as a bank? What is my mission statement as a bank? And then how can new tech help me deliver that mission statement? So effectively challenge the status quo in terms of the way you've traditionally done business, then digitalization becomes more of an opportunity. And then, of course, there are a whole raft of practical implications. One of the ones we touched upon, and going from the erudite maybe to the more mundane, is choice of vendor when it comes to cloud. A lot of our clients are multinational banks or fintechs, and if they're not, they have aspirations to be. And use of cloud technologies is oftentimes challenging for them if those cloud providers cannot expand on a global basis with them. If they can't, for example, do things like use multiple different kinds of data center, if they can't do both dedicated and shared, if they can't deploy in multiple different kinds of country, then effectively you cannot address the total addressable market on a global basis. And so little things like that are kind of considerations. So I'd say, the chance to rethink your business through technology, and also the ability to be cognizant of new technology, to get yourself out there. One of the great things about an event like this is banks and issuers will see new technologies which perhaps challenge their perceptions of how they run their businesses at all. Rather than make an assumption about how you want to change your business and then find the technology, make yourself aware of the technology, then use your imagination to figure out how it can change your business. And that invariably creates a kind of more creative, disruptive approach.
That's very interesting. I think in terms of what you mentioned about resources, the resources that the banks have access to, it's interesting how if you choose existing resources, it's almost as if you're going in one direction. But then if you identify the emerging innovations that are happening, it will almost give you a competitive edge, I would have thought. But I think that it will be interesting to see what banks continue to leverage on their journey towards digital. And I think we'll have to come back this time next year and discuss. Maybe it will be a different story.
I'm sure it will. It'd be disappointing if it weren't.
Yes, yeah, that would be quite sad, wouldn't it? Anyway, Abe, it's been great to speak to you.
A pleasure.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you very much.